Today, we are asking the question that has markets in such a tizzy right now. Is software dead? Welcome back to the AI Daily Brief. One of the things that happens pretty frequently on this show is that I will start clocking a theme that I think is having some amount of narrative resonance, either in conversations on Twitter/X or starting to break into the mainstream media, but which I don't think demands a full deep dive yet. Sometimes those themes dissipate, but sometimes they lurk and grow until they can no longer be ignored. That is absolutely what has happened with today's theme, where concerns about AI disruption have turned into a full-on market panic as software sells off. Now, the basis for this won't surprise any listeners of this show. We have been tracking, ever since coming back from the holidays, the extent to which people are embracing that a fundamental inflection point on the capability set of AI around coding has shifted the world that we live in. What's important to note is that this belief set has not been constrained to AI early adopters. It has started to find its way into other circles, particularly business and financial circles. A couple of weeks ago, the narrative really started to find its way into Wall Street. SaaS companies in particular began sliding, and things have now reached a full-on fever pitch, with Bloomberg and the Wall Street Journal publishing dozens of articles so far this week. To give a sense of what's happening, Salesforce is down 21% on the year, Snowflake is down 23%, HubSpot is down 36%, and AppLovin is down 37%. In each case, the fiercest sell-off happened over the past few days, giving a sense that this narrative is only accelerating. Jeffrey Favuza, who works at the equity trading desk at Jefferies, said, "We call it the SaaS-pocalypse, an apocalypse for software as a service stocks." He added that the trading flow he's seeing across his desk is very much get-me-out style selling. And what's important to note is that it appears, at least at first glance, that many of those racing for the exits have a genuine belief that something meaningfully changed over the past month. Michael Rourke, the chief market strategist at Jones Trading, said, "I don't think it's an overreaction. For 2 years, we've been talking about how AI is going to change the world and that it is a multi-generational technology. In the past few weeks, we've seen signs of it in practice." It's also important to note that this isn't a broad-based tech sell-off. Apple, for example, is up 2% so far this year and 12% from a local low 2 weeks ago. The iPhone stock seems blissfully unaware of the disruption going on around it, even as Apple fails to put forward a meaningful AI strategy. At the same time, it is notable that we've had a dozen AI-related sell-offs since the release of ChatGPT in late 2022. They basically ping-pong between a narrative that the technology is overhyped or that it's wildly disruptive and some portion of big tech is failing to keep up in the AI race. This is the first time we've seen the market try to price in broad-based disruption that could kill off an entire sector. And while the focus has mostly been on SaaS, another example showed the market's concerns about AI disruption last week. We, of course, talked about the new test model of Google's Genie 3, where you can generate entire interactive worlds. Gaming stocks plunged on that news, with game engine creator Unity seeing 35% wiped off their stock price since Genie 3 came out last Thursday. Grand Theft Auto maker Take-Two Interactive saw a 39% drop, which was severe enough for CEO Strauss Zelnick to issue a statement. Basically that Genie is exciting, but there's way more that goes into game development than just world creation. He might be right, but that hasn't made investors any less scared. Private markets are also taking an absolute pounding, according to Apollo Global Management co-president John Zito. Bloomberg reported for the first time on comments that Zito made during the fall. He argued that tariffs, inflation, and high interest rates are all minor concerns, commenting, "The real risk is software dead?" Now, Apollo already made their move last year, slashing exposure to software in their private credit funds from 20% to 10% and actively shorting some names. The broader question is whether the entire business model of software still makes sense in the AI era. Isaac Kim, a partner at VC firm Lightspeed who previously worked in tech private equity, commented, "Technology private equity in its current form is dead." He added that buying software firms has a clear formula. The burn rate starts high, but margins increase and leverage increases as the business matures. This model, Kim continued, assumes the underlying product remains relevant long enough for financial engineering to work. AI has changed that assumption. Casey Smith on X called this the great SaaS meltdown. Software stock woes, he argues, are deepening and the old playbook is broken. One, he says, high growth, low profitability is dead. The market has stopped rewarding growth at all costs. If your SaaS isn't printing cash or showing a clear path to profit by 2026, investors are out. Two, the AI question mark. AI is a double-edged sword for software. On growth durability, can these companies stay relevant or will AI agents replace their core functions? On profitability, inference costs are massive and traditional high margins are getting squeezed. Finally, there's the seat crisis. Why pay for 100 seats when AI lets 10 people do the same work? The per-user pricing model is facing an existential crisis. The bottom line, he writes, the era of easy SaaS gains is over. Durability and efficiency are the new kings. And this is where we were heading into a couple of days ago, when the final domino fell in a way that tipped this conversation into overdrive and made this particular show inevitable. Believe it or not, the catalyst for the latest market meltdown was a Claude CoWork legal plugin. The Wall Street Journal wrote, data provider stocks tumble on AI competition fears. RunLayer's Andy Berman wrote, there are hundreds of verticals like these, and plugins will disrupt each of them one by one. Secure access to tools like CoWork is going to change how every company operates. Oh, and RIP billable hours. And so this is where things are. Basically, markets are freaked as the sand in which they stand upon shifts under their feet once again. We have come a long way from Mark Andreessen's essay about why software is eating the world that was published all the way back in 2011. Since Andreessen wrote that post, software, and SaaS in particular, has been one of the easiest long-term bets on Wall Street. You just park your money there and inevitably over time it goes up. But it's pretty undeniable that AI is changing the nature of how software gets built. Tons of people are experiencing this. CNBC anchor Deirdre Bosa tweeted yesterday, woke up this morning and said, for fun, let's try to recreate Monday.com with Claude CoWork. It won't work or anything, but we can just show our audience that it's plausible. 1 hour later, I literally have my own Monday.com that's plugged into my calendar and Gmail and surfaced a kid's birthday that was not anywhere on my radar and I need to get a gift for. Can imagine the next step being order gift and have it delivered by Sunday. Now, she adds, to be clear, me being able to vibe code a personal tool is not going to disrupt the software trade, but someone who does know what they're doing very well might. The thing is, I'm not so sure people are convinced of that. It may be, in fact, that Deirdre being able to vibe code a personal tool is exactly what disrupts the software trade. YC founder Chris Pisarski writes, I don't think people are taking this seriously enough. One of our AEs just got off a demo with a prospect who's building internal sales and go-to-market workflows with Replit to replace a SaaS tool they are currently paying for. The Replit agent told him to use our API, so he reached out. He showed us a demo of one of the apps he built. Pull a list of everyone who attended a specific event, enrich each person, run web search on people with only a username, set to priority. He was non-technical, seeing this trend more and more over the last 2 months. And certainly if you listen to this show, you hear a lot of stories like this. Hell, my head of sales got annoyed a couple of weeks ago that our website still had information from previous iterations, and instead of asking our engineering team if he could go work with our previous designer and Webflow specialist to change things, homie just Claude coded an entire replacement, and frankly, it kicks the slats out of our old website. So does this mean software is dead? One of the key counterpoints is kicked up by PromptWatch's Klaus. He writes, SaaS is dead, says someone who's never stepped foot in a company with more than 7 people. The point being, of course, that many of these stories of disruption are from the absolute most enfranchised, nimble, highly technically literate, and fast-moving types of companies, and that the dynamics inside bigger companies are very, very different. James Blunt expanded the thought. He writes, large enterprises don't run on apps. They run on decades of layered systems, ERP, mainframes, custom services, data warehouses, compliance controls, and fragile integrations nobody dares touch without a 12-month change plan. AI agents don't just plug in and replace that. He cautions that there's a difference between markets and the actual lived reality of enterprises. Stocks, he says, can move on expectations. Enterprise architecture moves on risk tolerance. Those timelines are very different. In an interview a couple of days ago, NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang spoke about this, saying that the market is just plain wrong. The notion, he said, that AI is somehow going to replace software companies is the most illogical thing in the world, and time will prove it.
Let's give ourselves the ultimate thought experiment. Suppose we are the ultimate AI, artificial general robotics, the ultimate AI, the physical version of us. You could, of course, solve any problem because you're humanoid. You could do things. If you were a human or robot, would you use a screwdriver or invent a new screwdriver? I would just use one. Would you use a hammer or invent a new hammer? Would you use a chainsaw or invent a new chainsaw?
HubSpot founder Dharmesh wrote, I'm biased, but I wish I could give this 100 likes. The idea that really hit home for me, if we had the ultimate AI, would it go and reinvent ServiceNow or SAP or other software tools? Or would it just use the proven tools out there because that's the most efficient way for it to achieve its goals? It would use the proven tools. Dan Jeffries agrees, writing, nobody, and I mean absolutely nobody, wants to code and support every piece of software they use. This is a total and complete waste of time. If the market already built what you want and it's good, you are wasting time and money rebuilding it for nothing. And nobody wants to do every job either. You don't want to vibe code the AI accounting software and then support it and verify its output. You want the accountants using the AI accounting software. People are really losing their minds in the distortion field right now. The reality is we've also seen some of these experiments. Sebastian Siemiatkowski, the CEO of Klarna, is probably the most prominent example of an executive who explicitly shut down and tried to replace SaaS services like Salesforce. But a year into the experiment, he wrote, "I don't think it's the end of Salesforce. It might be the opposite." He explained exactly why Klarna was doing it and why it was more than just a grudge against Salesforce, but said that the specific considerations that they had and the efficiencies that they were looking for are likely not going to be worth it for most companies. He wrote, "Will all companies do what Klarna does? I doubt it. On the contrary, much more likely is that we will see fewer SaaS consolidate the market, and they will do what we do and offer it to others." On top of that, there's also the fact that a lot of the folks who are running these companies are quite excited about what AI can do for them. Going back to the gaming example, for example, Epic Games founder Tim Sweeney wrote, "Genie 3 is amazing. I prompted it to remake Jill of the Jungle in 3D and it did a reasonable job." He continued, "World models have huge advantages in vast knowledge of the world and ability to mash up varied content and styles. Engines have huge advantages in a stable representation of the world, reproducible simulation, and GPU and power-efficient rendering." And that was on someone saying that he didn't think that Genie 3 was supposed to be generating Fortnite gameplay, effectively bringing up IP issues. Tim didn't take the chance to sue Google. He said AI Darth Vader in Fortnite last year, and now Gemini's pure world model shows how fast AI is evolving. So what are the takeaways here? Is that any time you hear anyone talk in extremes, obvious hyperbole, like is X dead, the default answer should always be, of course not. Of course there is more nuance to this. However, I also think that in this particular case, the answer, the version that Jensen gave, of no one's going to bother, they'll just use what exists, is not sufficient either. So is there in fact a more nuanced take that recognizes that we are in the midst of a dramatic shift without assuming that shift means the end of an entire category of business? Some folks, like the Wall Street Journal's Dan Gallagher, are focused on the fact that when it comes to markets, long-term reality doesn't matter, it's short-term expectations. He wrote a piece called "AI Won't Kill the Software Business, Just Its Growth Story." He says software vendors are now in the challenging position of having to disprove a negative. Showing acceleration in revenue growth would help counter fears of AI disruption, but that'll be difficult in a time of tightening corporate spending and large-scale workforce reductions. Layoffs can affect the number of seats that underpin many cloud software contracts. The big customers that software companies sell to are also investing in their own internal AI projects that may not be designed to replace the software platforms they use, but can still consume IT budget dollars and management attention. At the least, he writes, that could give customers additional leverage in contract renewal negotiations. So basically, among other impacts, even if it doesn't kill SaaS, it could pretty dramatically change how it's priced. Ben Thompson agrees with this. He wrote, "In the shorter term, the real risk I see for software companies is the fact that while they can write infinite software thanks to AI, so can every other software company. The problem now is that while businesses may not want to give up on software, they don't necessarily want to buy more. If anything, they need to cut their spending so they have more money for their own tokens. That means the growth story for all these companies is in serious questions. And the industry-wide re-rating seems completely justified to me. It is also the case that we don't need an entire category to die for specific companies to be wildly disrupted." Investor Chao Wang writes, "My intuition is that AI makes strong software companies stronger and weak software companies weaker. This is because the moat of strong software companies was never software, but rather distribution, proprietary data, workflow integration, enterprise lock-in, network effects, trust and compliance, etc. Whereas the moat of weak software companies was just software." Pavel Asparajo puts it simpler. "SaaS is dead is probably oversold, and sleepy companies get wrecked in technology shifts is probably undersold." Even the people like Steven Sinofsky, who are writing thought pieces about how software isn't going to die, are still adding caveats like this one. "It is absolutely true," he writes, "that some companies will not make it. It is even true that in some very long time, longer than a career or generation, every company will be completely different or their product line and organization will have dramatically changed." And indeed, to me, that's the more interesting question. Is not, is software dead, but how is it going to change? Who loses from that and who benefits? One obvious area is the companies that already have the relationships are in a good position to bring the next generation of software into market. Y Combinator president Gary Tan writes, "Software is not dead. SaaS without agents may suffer, but agent SaaS is alive, well, and winning." Tyler Hogg writes, "The public SaaS turnaround in 3 steps. 1, dramatically cut stock-based compensation. 2, aggressively deploy AI agents internally. 3, aggressively transition your product from old-school SaaS to agent revenue. Hard, but necessary." John Lober is optimistic. He writes, "Maybe we will finally have good software." He writes, "Many people are writing about the death of B2B SaaS, but somehow everyone leaves out, those SaaS products were never good. Most software is hideously broken. Terrible UX, bugs, and obvious functionality that's missing. People are upset about S&P and Salesforce tanking, but what does this really mean? Today, these companies are about extracting value from their market position more so than really creating new software. The bar for quality is and always has been on the floor. Now that we have AI tooling, perhaps what will happen is that these companies will finally begin to compete on quality. The average software company can absorb an almost arbitrary amount of AI investment to finally make their product good, not bad. We may wind up with a similarly structured SaaS market, but the software may finally, hopefully, be good and pleasant to use. So my base case is that we are in for an enormous amount of disruption. I think what's very hard to tell is exactly what categories it's going to be in and how. To take another example, OpenClaw creator Peter Steinberg recently argued on a podcast that AI is going to replace 80% of the apps that you have on your phone. Frankly, that strikes me as more plausible than a 50,000 person industrial giant all of a sudden deciding that they're going to vibe code their own workday. There's also a lot of unknowns. Investor Gokul Rajaram commented on Jensen's point, which was again, isn't AGI just going to choose the screwdriver that already exists? Gokul writes, the challenge with this framing for software companies is that AI chooses the tool to use, and AI will select the optimal tool based on several criteria which change over time. This doesn't bode well for a specific piece of software having a long-term relationship with a customer, if AI can switch them off in favor of a competitive tool. It is the very definition of commoditization. TLDR, delegating tool choice and tool use to AI agents is likely worse for software companies, not better. Caveat, it's mitigated if humans choose the tool based on prior vendor relationships and AI simply uses the tool, but I see this as a slippery slope and humans will ultimately delegate the choice of tool to AI. Now, ultimately, when it comes to this particular market sell-off, it's clear that there's a lot more going on than just questions about AI and SaaS. Markets are nervous about everything right now. They have no solid footing, and they haven't since they started getting skeptical of the AI build-out at the end of last summer. It is very possible, in fact likely, that in a few weeks everything is resolved and we see this blip similar to the DeepSeek moment in January 2025. In other words, a thing around AI that was a real phenomenon but which was wildly overblown as markets try to grapple with an unknowable future. And so the takeaway of that should be some amount of calm when it comes to just how fast the change is going to be. At the same time, I do think it would be a mistake to blithely write off just how significant the structural change we are a part of is. While I and David Ricardo agree that the theory of comparative advantage suggests that every company is not going to become an everything company, I think that there are going to be massive implications for the way that software is priced, the leverage that companies have or not when it comes to their contracts, the way that procurement happens. I think that it is almost for sure that in a decade we're using 10 times as much software as we use now. But I do not know what that means for any individual company that is selling software. I think the landscape could look dramatically different. And so once again, I'm left to actually feeling that the market is accidentally behaving in a healthy manner. Not that it should be reacting so strongly right now, but that this process of re-rating SaaS might be ultimately healthy. Whatever the case, I'm sure this is not a debate that we are going to stop having, so I will pause for now. Appreciate you guys listening or watching as always, and until next time, peace.